Okay, so I've got a few lights in there, but they're not really the lights I want. These are, well, do you know what sort of lights these are?
Round flat.
Yeah, round flat. And if they're below the ceiling, what do you call them? Do you know what they're generally called? All those lights that are hanging down, or pendants. There we go. These are pendant lights, and so they're fine, pendant lights generally, but not those particular ones. I want to go for a different kind of light though. I want to use a recessed light. So I'm going to go back to component, and then load family, back to lighting, and then architectural, internal, and you'll see then that you have some downlight recessed lights. Here we are, downlight recessed can. And you can modify these and make them smaller so they're more like those LED point lights. But for now, I'll just use them as they are. So here, if I just double click there, downlight recessed can. And if you find, this is with any family, that once you've loaded it, it doesn't come up in your properties here. It just means you've loaded it previously. So I've already loaded this light, and it's going to reload it for me when I go to load family, as I've just done. But it's just one of those things in Revit, you need to choose it again in the list over here in properties. So even though I went to load family and chose it, I need to choose it again here in properties. Alright, so I'll come and have a look at it in a minute, but I'll just move on for now. And so here you can see it's going to let me place a recessed light into my ceiling joist, but that wouldn't really make sense. You can see they're bigger than the ceiling joists, and also cutting a notch out of the joist isn't really acceptable for lights like this. So you've got to make sure you've got room for these lights. The program's not going to work it all out for you. And so in this ceiling I can definitely put some of those lights in. So I'll just put a few in over here. And then the other thing you need to make sure you have allowed for is room above your ceiling. So I think I showed you before briefly how you can look at the ceiling height, but I didn't show you how you can adjust it. So we've got here the ceiling selected, and you can see there the height there is set from the level below, 2700. And then it's a compound ceiling. You can see they're called plain. That's one I've made. So I'm going to go back to a thicker ceiling, which is one probably that you'll have initially. So if you're looking at your ceiling, if you haven't changed it, I'll just quickly change it and make it the same as what you've got. So we'll call it not basic ceiling, it's a bad name. Original ceiling. So when you look at your ceiling's properties, it'll probably have something like this, 57 for the structure, and then 10 mil or something for the lining, essentially, which is going to be plasterboard. So I know I did that pretty quickly, but just to show you, when you select your ceiling, if you go to Edit Type and then click Edit for the structure, you'll see those properties. And so that's okay if you need a ceiling to include the structure as well, but you don't always need to have all of that. And actually what you can do with a project like this quite often is just use a basic ceiling instead. So the ceiling that you'll be set to use initially is a compound ceiling. So a compound ceiling has a thickness. It includes the structure and the thickness of the lining. Whereas a basic ceiling And you should have this one in your file, just called generic. It's just flat. So it's got no thickness, and that means there's less to go wrong. Okay, so you won't have anything to cut through for your lights. The other problem people often have with lights, not so much with this project, but well, actually here you can see that it would be a problem. It's when the light goes into something else. So there, I know, just because I know how this light works, that wouldn't work. Any idea why it might not work? Exactly, that's right. The light source is about here in this particular light. So that's right in the middle of the joist, and the joist is going to block any light that comes out of this. And so you see this all the time when people go and just place a lot of lights. I've seen people put hundreds of lights into a project before checking to see if it's working, and then realise only when they go to render that every single light is being blocked by a floor on the level above, or something like that. Because it's quite common for the floors to have a bit of thickness. Here, the floor is not very thick because of this, the way this building is, but often your floor will be thicker. So it might be something like that. So that kind of floor is going to block these lights. So I know I'm spending a bit of time on recessed lights because they're a common light type, and this is a common problem you'll have with them. So just watch out for that, and the best way to avoid it is to have a look in your section and really see what's happening above the lights. And I can there move that light away from the joist there, just using the arrow key to move that to the left. And then I know the light is not going to be interfered with. So that's recessed lights. Pendant lights don't have the same issues because they're below the ceiling. So back to component, load family, and lighting, architectural, internal, and we've got some different basic pendant lights here. I'll just go for that's the one I want. And start putting that over here maybe. And then another good light is the spotlight. So back into here, lighting, architectural, internal, and then you've got downlight spot. So again, I'd loaded this light previously, so it's not selected for me. I need to check in properties and find it in the list there. So there it is, downlight spot. And notice with this one, you've got different angles set up. So this is a really good one because you can change the angle of the light and point it in different directions. So I'll go for the 75-degree tilt for now. And then I'll just put some along here, and I'll rotate them afterwards. So it's facing to one side, but I'll show you how to rotate that to face it the right way. Zooming in there just to get it right. And that'll do. Okay, so what I recommend, once you get a few lights in there and you want to make sure they're working, is that you do a test render. So I'm going to make a camera view, a new camera view that is going to show most of that area. And I'm not going to worry too much about adjusting it. I'm just going to click on the teapot down with view control bar. Or if you can't see that, go to the view tab and click the render button there. And just on draft, I'll change the scheme to interior artificial only. hit render. Okay, so I can tell the lights are doing something, but it looks a little dark. And so then, final thing, just to get the light to appear a bit brighter, is to adjust the exposure. Go down towards the bottom there, you've got adjust exposure, and I can make that brighter. And then we can see much more clearly that the light's working. So once you're at that point and you're confident that the lights are doing what you expect them to, don't worry if you get patches that seem too bright, because again you can bring the exposure back down once you've got more lights in there. I might just adjust that view a little so you can lower down. And so it's often at this point that you'll start fine-tuning your materials and other things as well. But I can tell, well, the downlights, the downlights, the spotlights, I know are working because that's what's giving me these pools of light in front of the wall here. And those pendant lights are working as well, so I can see the light on the ceiling. So I can go ahead and keep using those lights and be confident that they're going to produce something. That's only on draft, that's why the quality's so low, so if we got to medium, it'll take a bit longer, but should look a lot better. Okay, so if you want to, you can have a look at the settings in those lights, and you can adjust every property. You can, of course, adjust the brightness and the colour, but that's something you might want to look at later on once you've gotten used to getting the lights in the first place. So it's also good to start testing it out before you put everything in. When you've got simpler geometry and fewer lights, and simpler materials, things render much faster. And so you can do your test renders, make sure it's all working before you've got a million complex things in your file and before you put too many lights in. Notice when it's rendering, it tells you how many lights are in the scene. The more lights, the longer and the more complex the render's going to be. And again, I've seen plenty of students, especially when they're in the final year, they're in a rush to finish everything and just go ahead and put in most of their lights before they check the rendering. And then and I've seen people doing their first test renders with 100 or so lights, and so their test renders take 10-20 minutes just to see if it's working. Are you in Xavier's class? Yeah, so I've been checking to see if you're there. Yeah, he's away today, so he just asked if you could join this class. So I'm just doing a recording, but yeah, that's right. Okay, so yeah, you can see that those lights are working, and notice how, as I increase the render quality, those things like the glass discs there start to render properly. So don't worry if things like that render dark. As long as there's light coming out, I'll just show you in draft again what was happening. Okay, so in draft, that glass doesn't render properly. But you can still tell that the light's working because it's got light coming out onto the ceiling and also a little bit down below. So don't worry if you see things like that, that's actually a render quality setting. As you increase the quality, basically it's going to project the light through that glass as well. Yeah, I won't wait for this one to finish again, but just be aware of that. So that's all I'll do on the lights themselves for now, but I'll do another thing on rendering in a minute.